Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the May webinar for Kevin Davis Insurance. My name is Sherry Branson, and I'm your host today. Today's webinar is Cyber Q&A for Community Associations. I'm now joined by Kevin Davis, the president of Kevin Davis Insurance. Good morning, Kevin.
Hello there, Sherry. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Good morning from soggy Texas. We're getting a lot of rain. It's been raining for 8 days in a row, Kevin. So,
Wow.
Yeah, we definitely have plenty of rain, so I'll send some your way because I know that California could use a little bit of water, right?
We can use a lot of water. It's been very, very dry. We had a little bit of rain this winter, but nowhere enough to stop people from. I still can't water my lawn yet. I don't even have one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, people are tearing up their lawns out there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think we could fill up your reservoirs about 5 times over right now.
Oh, please do.
Texas is going to be an island pretty soon, I think. And Tamara, we have a great topic that we're going to talk about today, cyber Q&A. I know we've been doing cyber for a while now.
Yep.
You know, we've covered it in every way, shape, and form. And today we're going to answer all the questions that we receive from everybody.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing about this webinar today. We've received so many questions over the past couple of months that we put them all together, and we got some new ones in the past couple of days that we're going to just throw out there and kind of talk about.
Absolutely. And I wanted to mention to everybody joining us today, if you have any additional questions or something's been on your mind that you've been wanting to ask us, you can ask it two ways. You can type into the chat box that's on your screen, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the webinar if we have time, or you could send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and we're happy to answer your questions in a phone call or through an email. And if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please send me an email as well. Now, Kevin, one of the hot questions that's come in is, what exactly is cybercrime?
Okay. When we talk about cybercrime, we're talking about information that businesses have today on their clients, vendors, and employees. When that information is lost or stolen or missing, it can go into what's called a data breach. And a data breach, if it occurs, by law, action must be taken. So you're talking about protecting personal identifiable information from a data breach.
From a data breach, okay. Can you define what exactly is a data breach, Kevin?
Okay, sure. A data breach is the acquirement of that personal identifiable information that's unauthorized and compromises the security and confidentiality of an individual.
Okay, when you say personal identifiable information, that's a long term. What exactly is that?
Okay, what we're talking about is the individual's first and last name plus social security number or a driver's license number or a credit card number, bank number, debit number, security password. So those two pieces of information together, meaning that if you went to your doctor's office and you looked over the desk and saw social security numbers there and your number was there, by itself is not a data breach. But if your name and other people's names was attached to the social security number, then you have a data breach.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so the two pieces of information have to be together, Kevin.
Exactly, that's how it works.
Okay. And how do states have laws regarding this information, Kevin?
Oh, sure. Right now, you have 47 states out there that has notification requirements. The only 3 states are Alabama, New Mexico, and South Dakota. The only 3 states right now don't have any kind of notification requirement.
Okay, so most of the states do have some type of a requirement. And South Dakota probably has 2 people, so if there was a breach, we'd know who did it, right?
Exactly. And when you're talking about cyber crime, what you're really talking about are two things. Not just that loss of data, because people talk about the loss of data, but also the loss of money. So you have loss of data and loss of money, which is the unauthorized access of funds. So when you talk about data breach, you talk about both of those things together. We only talk about one most of the time, and that is just the data breach itself. But they're really after the money.
Absolutely. That's the ultimate goal, to embezzle money. And when you talk about these data breaches, Kevin, how exactly do they happen?
Okay, I just lost you. Say it again.
Oh, sorry. How do data breaches actually happen?
Oh, okay. All right. We talk about the data breach. Okay, we're talking about most of it occurs by human error. Okay, from passwords left out on a computer screen, employees opening emails they shouldn't open up, lost laptops, smartphones. When you talk about security breaches, you're talking about human error. That's what it really boils down to.
Okay. So it basically employees could leave their password out in the open, or they might click on an email that they shouldn't click on, that type of a thing, right, Kevin?
Exactly. That's what we're talking about right there. Um, Now, for community associations, Sherry, the major problem is the board members themselves are made up of volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I know that, in these cyber attackers, I know that they go after the businesses that cannot afford to be hit, really, the ones that don't have firewalls, don't have large IT departments, small businesses. They're the most vulnerable, basically.
Yeah, and that's leads to community association itself. We have community associations. There's very little oversight for people handling the funds. I mean, just think, it's easy to become a board member. It's even easier to become a treasurer. You usually show up, raise your hand, and now you're a board member or you're a treasurer. And most community associations turn over handling all the funds, even the reserve account, which should never happen, to an independent property manager, again, with very little oversight. So what you talk about for community association, you talk about not only very little oversight for people handling the funds, but you talk about volunteers, people who lack the experience and knowledge to run a community, or any kind of business for that matter.
That's right. That's right. Most of the volunteers, most of the board members have very little training, very little experience, and that's the case at most of these associations, Kevin.
Exactly.
Now, Kevin, everybody joining us today works in the community association industry in some shape or form. They're either a broker or a property manager, or maybe even a board member might be joining us today. And by the way, if you'd like to invite your customers to any of our webinars, please invite your customers. They're more than welcome. Now, why is cyber important to community associations, Kevin?
Okay. Now, when you talk about cyber for community associations, the criminal, the hacker, wants to gain access to the funds. Okay, we talk about the assessments, the reserve account, or vendor payments. They also want that personal identifiable information to people who live in that association so they can steal their identity. So you talk about identity theft issues also there.
Oh, okay.
Now, this is what I believe is the big exposure for community associations right now. Now, Sherry, you live in a homeowner association, right?
Right.
Okay. Let's say you ran for the board and now you are the board president.
Okay.
Okay, and you left your laptop in the car, and all of a sudden somebody stole your laptop.
Okay.
Now, on the laptop itself, you have access provided by the management company to the unit owner's banking information.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
What do you do?
That's a good question. I really wouldn't know what to do if the laptop was stolen. I wouldn't know where to begin, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the point. You don't know who to report it to. You don't know if you have to report it or how to report it. You know nothing. Okay? Now, historically, when laptops were stolen or missing, you just go out and buy a new one. You go, oh, I can't believe you buy a new one. Now, because of the cyber notification laws we just talked about, the situation needs to be investigated. And if there's a chance a data breach can occur, it must be reported as required by law. Have to be reported by law. Now that it has happened, but not that it actually happened itself, but if there's a chance of it happening, it must be reported.
It must be reported. Okay. So if a laptop is stolen, you have to report that it's stolen because that...
Now, okay, wait a minute. See, okay, this is important. Your laptop has been stolen. Now, there's information on that laptop, okay? If you believe that there's personal identifiable information on that laptop, it has to be reported.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now, just because the laptop is stolen doesn't mean you have to do anything. You got to find out, should you report it? You got to determine if it's an incident itself or actual data breach.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So there may not be a data breach just because the laptop is lost or stolen, right, Kevin?
Yes,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, because they might not have the means to get in there and have access to the information. They might not be able to get your password or figure it out how to get into the laptop to get that info.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. But when in doubt, report is what you're saying. Okay. And Kevin, just the number one question that I get asked a lot by people, I'm sure you do, is why do I need a cyber policy when the property management company or the bank is responsible for collecting all this information from the homeowners?
Okay. Again, sort of like the last question, it's kind of very similar. But this is different because community association board members believe that if they turn over the data and assessment collection to the management company or bank, they're no longer responsible. This may not be true. Remember, the person who owns the system may not be the same person who owns the data. The community association, it's their data, so they are responsible.
Okay, they're ultimately responsible.
So if the management company system is hacked or the bank is hacked, the community association may still have the legal obligation to notify that the breach occurred to unit owners and maybe also regulators. You
Okay.
got that? Okay, now, also, the management company may collect the data, but from time to time, the board may have to view that very sensitive data for board member approval. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And you have monthly board packets that may contain personal identifiable information about assessment collections, late notice, vendor payment information that may contain credit card or banking information.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Now,
Okay?
Kevin, what comes to mind is we're talking about this data, we talked about a laptop, et cetera, on the system. What about paper files?
Okay. Again, paper files are also data also. It doesn't have to be electronic files. It can be data. And when you look at community association, one thing they hardly ever do is purge files. They don't purge them. So when one management company takes over that information, they just move it along and move it along to the point where they have so much data in there, so much information, that the only thing they can do is destroy it. But when they destroy it, is it destroyed properly?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. See, what it boils down to, Sherry, is that it is in the best interest of the community association to purchase a cyber policy to protect because of the information that the board has access to. Just because they don't handle the information, because they pass it on, doesn't mean it doesn't belong to them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. And I have bumped into some board members at trade shows who said that they still use paper files, only paper files too. So that does exist, the paper and, of course, the computer. And Kevin, the next question that has come in is, what are the costs associated with a data breach?
Okay.
How expensive are these things?
Sure. There are 8 items here that we come up with that when there's a data breach, these are things you have to be concerned about, and these will cost you real dollars. The first thing we're talking about is a forensic examination. This examination determines if there's a breach or an incident itself. So you have to have an examination to find out if there's actually a breach or not. Once that examination is done, you have to figure out what the severity and scope of the breach is. Because again, the key thing is it an actual breach itself or only an incident?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. Something lost a laptop lost may not be an actual data breach. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Now, the second one is notification of third parties. Most states have enacted the data breach laws, 47 of them, when personal identifiable information is lost or stolen. You have to notify the individuals that was involved in that by law. So again, if that laptop is stolen, by law you have to notify the people whose information was in the laptop.
Mm-hmm.
The next one's a call center. Companies should provide a phone number in that notification letter for individuals, just let them know what's going on and the extent of the breach.
Okay.
Okay? Credit identity monitoring. Okay, now, you don't have to have, it's not required by law to provide a credit or ID monitoring, anything like that, but it makes good customer service. To build up a good customer relationships, you should have it. You should.
Sure. To maintain your customers and keep that relationship, because the customers are nervous now and you don't want them to leave. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Public relations is the next one. You should be able to hire a PR firm that specializes in damage control after a data breach. So you should be able to hire somebody to come in and say, guess what? We are a great, wonderful company. Just because a data breach occurred, that's not us. It's somebody from the outside that did it. So you need a public relations firm to build that back up the community.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is legal defense. Now, when we talk about legal defense, we're talking about being sued, either the management company, the bank, or the community association as a result of the data breach, because you didn't have proper security. Now, this includes the cost to identify the people who had identity theft issues.
Okay.
But it also costs to identify the financial institutions for the cost of reissuing all those credit cards.
Ah, okay. That could really add up, Kevin. Those expenses could get really high. Thinking of Target, with that breach, that was thousands of people. So that's a lot of credit cards that the bank would have to reissue.
Yeah, the bank had to reissue. And guess who's responsible for those bank reissued credit cards? Target was. Target had to pay for all those credit cards.
Yeah, so that was one expensive breach. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And next one we have is regulatory fines and penalties. So a company may have to defend itself not only against the association, the unit owners, or the management company, but also any federal or state investigation, such as a Federal Trade Commission or a state attorney general's office. They can come in and say, you didn't notify them properly in the proper time, therefore we're going to fine you X number of dollars.
And like you said, 47 states have laws pertaining to this.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we have a comprehensive written information security program. If the state comes in, they may say that you were so wrong in the way you handle a situation that we want to see a 10-year plan for you so you can make sure that it does not happen again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Kevin, I can see that the costs and the expenses related to a breach can really, really add up. And that's why this policy is so expensive, because most associations just can't afford to pay for all these expenses. And, speaking of all these coverages that are provided or that are expected if there is a breach by the state laws, what do you believe is the average cost per record?
Okay. Now, this is based on the there's a report, I guess, Verizon did 2015 called a Data Breach Investigative Report. They're saying for about 1,000 records, it costs between $52,000 and $87,000. Okay, so now, let's look at our community association. How many units you have in your community association?
I think it's about 45-ish.
About 45. Okay, so now you're talking about 2 records per household at the minimum, and some may have 4. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's about around 150 to 200 records. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
per association.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the renters, people who rent places at there, people who used to live there and moved away.
Mm-hmm.
They have vendors like landscapers and roofers, pool management companies. Now you go on from 150 to 200 to about 200 to 250 records there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about at 250, anywhere between $13,000 and $22,000 per association.
Mm-hmm. That's money that the association would have to pay out of their reserve account to cover a breach.
Exactly. So that's how much of a cost for a data breach. Anywhere between $13,000 and $22,000 for your association you have that you live in right now.
Okay, okay. And of course, there's many larger associations out there, so the cost could go even higher.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Kevin. And now I have a question that's come in. Mike from Florida would like to know, what are the coverages I need to provide the necessary protection to my clients?
Okay. Now, when you talk about cyber coverage for community association, the first thing I understand is that there are no 2 cyber policies alike. The insuring agreement's all different. Some has 8, some has 10, some has 5. Some are added to the D&O or equipment breakdown policy. What we have is a standalone cyber policy. You have 4 insuring agreements, and the premium is about $500 for a $250,000 limit. Okay, now, when we talk about the coverage itself, we've divided it up into 2 sections. There is a cyber policy itself that protects the data, and there's a crime policy that protects the crime portion of it, the embezzlement, the unauthorized access of funds, the wire transfer. Okay?
Okay,
So let's start with the actual data breach itself.
okay,
We have 4 insuring agreements. The first one is called Network and Information Security Liability. What that does provide coverage when you are sued because of the data breach.
okay,
Okay? The second one is Regulatory Defense Expense. This is when claims are made by the government. For example, what we just talked about earlier. Okay, they can come in and say, you're supposed to notify them in 30 days. You didn't notify them in 30 days, so we're going to fine you. This policy pays fines and penalties. Again, most policies out there, you cannot pay fines and penalties. It is uninsurable by law. This policy is designed to pick that up.
mm-hmm. Okay,
Okay? The next one is Security Breach Notification Expense, which is the notification from beginning to the end, all the way through to the investigation to the identity theft part.
okay,
And then we have crisis management coverage, which is the actual PR. You hire a PR firm, they come back in, they help you out. That's what the crisis management expense is.
okay. So these are the 4 insuring agreements that are a part of our cyber policy, right, Kevin?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, if somebody wanted additional insuring agreements added to the cyber policy, they can do that, correct?
Okay, yes. And again, there are other coverages too. If you are a management company, for example, you may want to look at a full cyber policy. That includes communication and media liability, which covers the defamation claims like for online publications, business interruption, additional expenses, which is reimbursement for loss of income from system failure due to like a virus or denial of service. and e-commerce extortion, which is reimbursement for cyber extortion.
Cyber extortion. Okay, and I just received a question on that just a couple of weeks ago about Bitcoins and about ransomware, and HOA had been victimized by ransomware, and they were asked to pay in Bitcoin to get their information unlocked. It basically freezes up their information, like what happened to that hospital in LA. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so this coverage can be added in.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay.
Again, right now we have a cyber policy designed for community systems that's for insuring agreements. You want all 8 of them or 10 of them, please feel free to ask for them. We can get you one. It's going to cost a lot more money. It's about $2,000 to $3,000 versus $500 for insuring agreements.
Okay, but the coverage is available, which is good to know. And if anybody would like a cyber risk application, please send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and I'm happy to send you our specimen policy and our cyber risk application as well. And if you have any questions, again, about what we go over today, please type them in the chat box, or you can send them to my email at sbranson@kdins.com. And now, Kevin, now talking about crime, cyber crime, what should somebody be looking for in a crime policy?
Okay, again, you're talking about 4 insuring agreements, and this is under the crime policy itself. You're talking about employee dishonesty, and this is that coverage when an employee is involved in an unauthorized funds transfer. Okay, employee dishonesty. Computer crime. This coverage applies when a non-employee enters a premises, obtains a password, uses the password to steal funds. You know, a perfect example of that is people do leave their passwords on their laptop. Somebody comes in, a vendor comes in, looks at it, transfers money out.
Mm-hmm.
Wire fraud transfer. Coverage applies when a virus is introduced by email, an attachment, and the passwords are obtained and money is stolen by a person from the outside.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The last coverage, the brand new coverage, is social engineering coverage, which expands the crime insurance policy by endorsing people pretending to be vendors, employees, or clients, and will pay the insured for the loss from the transferring, paying, or delivering funds caused by social engineering fraud.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, I know that this is as Key mentioned, this is an endorsement to the crime policy, the social engineering. This is brand new, and we covered it last month, just in case you missed last month's webinar. And I have an application for social engineering if you'd like that as well. So send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com, and I can send you that application. And now, Kevin, I noticed that this is a really important one. Cyber policy coverage extends to the property manager. Shouldn't the managers have their own cyber coverage?
Sure. They should have their own cyber policy and should have all the different insurance agreements, as I mentioned before. What we do is provide coverage for the management company under the cyber policy because we believe if there's a claim, then we want to work together with the management company and the association and not them pointing fingers at each other. So it ultimately provides peace of mind when they both work well together. So we decided that we can give the management company a small limit and have them work together as opposed to saying it's your fault, it's not our fault.
Absolutely. Okay, so basically the property managers should carry their own, and they're covered under the association's policy that we sell as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And now, Kevin, here's a question. Mary from Illinois, she has a question about prior acts coverage.
Okay. Cyber is written excluding prior acts. There's no prior acts coverage in the cyber policy. That means the policy responds to wrongful act claims that occur after the inception date of the policy.
Okay.
Now, the challenge with cyber is how long hackers might be inside a system before being detected.
Okay.
Now, for example, let's say you buy your first cyber policy in January 2016, and then in March 2016 you learn your system has been breached. You investigate, you learn a breach occurred last July 2015.
Okay.
Now, without the prior acts coverage, which we don't have, the insurer can argue that the entire breach is based on an act that occurred before you purchase coverage. That's why you have to buy the cyber policy as soon as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Thank you, Mary, for that question. And now we have Roger from Toledo, Ohio. Roger wants to know, Kevin, how complicated is the cyber application?
Okay. Most cyber apps are very, very complicated, but the one we put together is pretty simple. You know, there are like 4 underwriting questions, and they all should be answered yes pretty easily. The first question is about creating and updating passwords. Do you do it or not? The next two questions really want verification of the use of firewall technology and antivirus software. Again, the answer should be a yes there. And finally, are you upgrading your system when those upgrades become available? That's it. If you answer those couple questions, then you can get a cyber policy pretty, again, for about $400 or $500.
Okay. So it's pretty easy application then, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Not too complicated. Okay, we like that. I'm sure everybody will like that. So it's not a complicated application. And again, I can send you the application if you'd like the cyber risk application as well. And now, Kevin, speaking of the premiums, you said they're not that expensive. How are these premiums determined, and what are they basically? What are the average premiums?
Okay, sure. When you talk about premiums, it's a pretty simple way we do it. If the annual revenues are less than $5 million, then if you have a $50,000 limit, $100,000, $250,000, or $500,000, the premiums are for $50,000, $290, $100,000, $341, $250,000, $482, and $500,000, $648.
Okay. Okay, so they're very reasonable then, Kevin.
Very, very reasonable.
Okay. Again, if you have any questions about the premiums or how it's all determined, please send an email to sbranson@kdins.com.
And one thing's interesting about these premiums, that they are so low that a lot of our agents out there are just automatically including them in all their coverages.
Oh,
so whenever they're quoting the property liability, they're throwing a cyber for $290 or $341, depending on the limit.
Yeah, it's very affordable, very, very affordable for some good limits, for some good coverage. And speaking of limits and then sublimits, a question came in. I heard you had sublimits on certain agreements. Is that true?
Sure. The first limit is the actual limit itself. So when you talk about the liability limits for being sued because you had an actual data breach, that is the limit, the full limit. Then we sublimit the other coverages. We sublimit notification, the defense part of it, and the PR part of it. So we sublimit the other three coverages.
Okay.
And we also sublimit the managed company also.
Gotcha. Okay. So there are sublimits. Okay. And Kevin, this question has come in from Brad. It actually came in a couple of days ago. He has 3 questions, so I'll read them all in a row, okay? Does cyber coverage provide reimbursement against an unapproved electronic withdrawal of funds from the association's bank account that was perpetrated by an untraceable hacker? Why would the Fidelity Bond not provide this cyber coverage if we had computer fraud or funds transfer fraud coverage? And what are some real-life claims or examples that the cyber coverage has covered for an association?
Okay. All right. Let's take that one by one. All right. The first one about the reimbursement against an untraceable hacker. Most of these hackers are untraceable. Once they get into your system, you can't find them. You wire transfer money out, and the money's gone. Wire transfer is the easiest way to get money because it's hard to trace it. When you talk about wire transfer fraud, you're talking about crime insurance. So you're right. The Fidelity Bond should pick it up under computer fraud or funds transfer coverage unless it's social engineering. So if that person willingly gave the money away, then all of a sudden it's not covered unless you have a social engineering coverage at all. In terms of real-life example of cyber coverage for association, it's all right now under the crime portion of it. All the cyber is related to wire transfer fraud, social engineering, and computer theft.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. So basically, it's important to have, that would tell everybody it's important to have the social engineering and the crime policy. And cyber, of course. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brad, for those questions. And now, Kevin, what happens if a board gets sued that doesn't carry cyber? Can they use their homeowner's policy or their GL?
Well, I would say that the problem with the CGL and the homeowner policy is that it covers bodily injury and property damage. And when you're talking about cyber, it's a really economic damage for the failure to protect personal identifiable information. That is under the cyber, it has nothing to do with bodily injury or property damage at all. So it would not be covered under those policies.
Okay, that's good to know. And Kevin, this question has come in from Susan. Does the association have to have a website to get this type of coverage?
No. The only requirement the board has to have is the individual personal identifiable information. That's all they have to have. And again, we're talking about paper files also. So it's not just the data in the computer, but it's also paper files. So no, you don't have to have a website at all. just
Uh-huh.
have access to the information.
Okay, great, thank you. And one thing I noticed is the Hartford Steam Boiler offers data compromise and identity recovery limits on their equipment breakdown coverage quotes. How is our cyber liability policy different?
Yeah. On a Hartford Steam Boiler product, they give you 2 insuring agreements. They give you notification and liability. We give you 4 insuring agreements. We give you the fines and penalties and the PR service, and we also include the management company. And one thing I forgot to mention is that we give a breach coach, a 30-minute breach coach. So when you, if you lose that laptop, you don't know what to do, you pick up the phone, call the breach coach that's allowed to part of the policy, and let them know you lost your laptop. What do you do now? And they'll help you out.
Okay, and this breach coach, Kevin, there's no cost for the breach coach, correct? If you have the
That's right.
policy, it's free. It's a free service.
30 minutes.
30 minutes for free. Great, awesome. Great. Great. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Thank you for a great webinar, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please send me an email to sbranson@kdins.com. And if you think of any questions afterwards, feel free to email them in as well. I didn't receive any emails in the chat box, but a lot of you think of questions later on. And please join us in June for our next webinar, which is on June 15th. And that webinar is Tune Up Your Career. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.